The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB-FM. Thank you for listening.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Empire actor Jussie Smollett, has been arrested for allegedly filing a false police report claiming he was the victim of a hate crime attack in Chicago. If this is proven to be true, how does this affect the LGBTQ community? And if this accusation is also proven to be true, how does it hurt the black community? Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and in light of this revelation, today on Hampton Roads Voices, we're going to talk about hate crimes in the African American and LGBT communities. That is next on Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams. And today on Hampton Roads Voices, we're talking about the Empire actor Jussie Smollett. And he has been arrested, of course, for allegedly filing a fake police report saying he was the victim of a hate crime in Chicago. And we want to look at this as a larger issue for the LGBT community as well as the black community. Have those false, if it's proven to be true, false allegations, will it hurt the communities? And also we want to know how if we think it affects our community here in Hampton Roads. Should he be removed from the TV show Empire? And do you think the community rushed to judgment when they are thinking about his guilt before all the facts have been presented? We really want to hear from you because it really isn't a conversation without you. The number is 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. Today we have in studio, we have Dr. T.A. Warren. He is a retired police officer and the Navy Commander Intelligence Officer. Dr. Warren, thank you for being here today.
Glad to be here.
And on the line, we have Dr. Gatson. He's an assistant professor of the psychology department here at Norfolk State University. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we want to get this conversation started, but I want to lay the foundation first. Dr. Warren, what is a hate crime?
Well, a hate crime is described more of a crime involving violence, motivated by prejudice, based on someone's race, religion, sexual orientation, or some other type of ground.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Dr. Gatson, from the psychological perspective, I would say, what causes a person to even consider a hate crime?
Yeah, there are so many variables, but what comes up for me initially when I think about this question is that often individuals who commit hate crimes often have what I like to call cognitive and cultural rigidities or inflexibilities. Often they are also motivated, obviously, by hate, which to me is just a symptom of fear. And sometimes people are afraid of their own annihilation, as when we think about it in terms of race and racism. And also misinformation. Fear and hate are also fueled by misinformation about other individuals, about what other individuals might do to them or what they might lose from other individuals. And, of course, for me also, unresolved feelings of inadequacy. Many times people who are committing hate crimes or feel these deep feelings of hatred often are projecting and displacing their own unresolved feelings of inadequacy.
Now, that is an amazing thing to hear because I just think sometimes we think it's just racial or we think it's one thing or the other. When you mention inadequacies and you mention fear, I don't know if we always have put those two things together. And so I think that's fascinating. So, of course, we know the situation was that the actor from Empire, Jussie Smollett, he said that he was attacked and also that homophobic and racial slurs were directed at him. Also, that bleach was thrown on him and then a noose was put around his neck. But the information is coming out now. We don't know because we do want to assume that a person is innocent until proven guilty. We don't know. But, Dr. Gatson, I'm going to stay with you on this one. What would make a person even say that happened to them if it did not?
Wow, that is a great question, and I certainly would have to be able to sit with such an individual to make a qualified and ethical assessment and diagnosis of that. But just thinking about this, theoretically, it seems to me that a person who would do such a thing would perhaps have a number of complex mental health issues. And as a result of those issues, perhaps might be attempting to, as a way of acting out, attempting to, one, perhaps get help in a very indirect way, or perhaps as a result of that mental illness, or whether it's depression or issues of the self, low self-esteem or self-efficacy, perhaps trying to feel better about oneself, trying to get that validation from through external means. And so often when people lie or fabricate in such ways, it's often a cry for attention. It's often a cry saying that, there's not much that I feel about myself or believe about myself, and I need to do certain things or act in certain ways that get attention from others because I don't often feel good about myself.
That is interesting. We want to hear from you. Today we're talking about hate crimes in the African American and LGBT communities and the hate crime hoax that we've been hearing about. Now, Dr. Warren, how does that play out on the streets? You're a retired police officer. We're hearing the things that Dr. Gatson is saying. How did you see that when you were a police officer?
Well, a lot of the times with individuals, like Dr. Gaston stated, when you see individuals that come in there, it depends on the education also of a different officer and his experience. If you look at individuals and then you wonder what internally they have going on with them, that they're going to externalize such type of behaviors and make some type of decisions. So as police officers, we have to sit back and assess the whole situation. We basically listen to the individual to collect all of the facts. And if their story is believable, then we move forth. In Justice Smollett case, the officer listened to his case and they moved forth with their investigation. And the investigation revealed a lot of other things. And therefore, that brought the question in his credibility. And as we know, as watching news, that's when it all rolled out.
Right.
That there was some doubt about his story and the accuracy of it.
And when I was watching a clip from CNN, Don Lemon, and the pundits that they had there on his show, he was saying that it was interesting that Jussie did not come out as quickly as they thought he should. And also that, and this I found interesting, that the LGBT community kind of had their antennas up to say, I don't know, that doesn't sound very plausible to me, before the larger community even said anything about that. And so, Dr. Gatson, what do you think about that in terms of the I'm not sure antenna, or that doesn't sound so plausible to me antenna that came out as the story began to unfold?
I think that's a really great question, and can really, I think it's very complex depending on the individuals who we're asking to think about their feelings of uncertainty. I do feel that we do have to have a conversation about the fact that just because people are a part of a sub-community or a cultural community doesn't mean that everyone in that community thinks the same way, has the same type of values or their belief systems, and that people can vary in how they see the world and how they see themselves, even if they are part of the same community. I think also we also have to have a larger discussion about what we mean by the concept of believing the victim. What does belief mean? Do we mean to say that when someone comes forth with a story of trauma, abuse, assault, etc., do we just automatically say, yes, this has happened, we believe you, and we're going to seek the information or the evidence to support this without any credible or complex nuanced investigation, or do we mean by believe we want to make this process as efficient, quick as possible, so that every party involved gets to keep their integrity, but that we don't rush to conclusions, but we take the matter seriously and we investigate with an open mind, not presuming someone to be guilty, but presuming that all parties are innocent until we're guilty.
Until they're... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, until we have that evidence. So I think we have to have this discussion about how the larger public understands this concept of believing.
Believing. Now, we have a caller on the line. Caller, what is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
Virginia Beach.
And your name, please?
Raymond.
Raymond, what is your question or comment? You're live on the air.
How you doing? I just wanted to say that what Jussie Smollett did was really bad because right about the same time, before this incident started, a House representative from West Virginia was on a radio station interview, and he commented that the scourge and the problem in America was the LGBTQ community, and how they're willing to do or say or pressure politicians and the media to see their views, force people to see their views. And then no more than a week later, Jussie Smollett does this stupid thing. Now, I'm going to say that he did it based on everything that I know in the media. It doesn't look good at all. I mean, any smart person can deduce that this is rigged. And I just hope for his sake that he just confesses to it, tells the judge the truth so they can get this behind him and he can move on. He's still young. He's still intelligent. But I really think what he's trying to do is be like a champion for the gay community. And he went in reverse fashion. He didn't have to go that way. And I think that's what the really big deal is for him. Is he even said it he had a concert, and he said he wants to be a gay Pac, talking about Tupac. He wants to be on that level. I mean, he's already setting himself up as sort of like a martyr for the gay rights community, and I think he really messed up big time.
Wow. Raymond, thank you so much for your comments. We appreciate that.
No problem. Have a good day.
Okay. What do you think about that, Dr. Warren?
I think from listening to a lot of individuals who discuss Smollett's case, I think we all should not try him in public,
right?
And allow the case to unfold. And the way the Chicago superintendent, the way he presented the case, I had some odd issues with that because I didn't think he should have got personal with it. He should have presented the facts versus telling the public that he was pissed about that. We're not trying to hear his feelings. We want to hear the facts. And I think they should have been presented that way. And we should all just sit back and wait to let the facts be revealed in court. And then we can pass judgment and give our a true honest assessment. And like Dr. Gasson said earlier, I like his second definition of believing. You want to, the person enters your office, you want to believe them based on what they say, but then go out and do a thorough investigation and give the victim and the suspect a fair opportunity to hear their story.
To hear their story, absolutely. And we thank Raymond for giving us the call from Virginia Beach. We'll take a break right now, and when we come back on the other side, we want to continue talking about your feelings in terms of this situation with Jussie Smollett. 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, I'm Benita Adams, and welcome to Hampton Roads Voices. Today we're talking about a very important topic because of the larger ramifications. And we're talking about hate crimes in the African American and LGBTQ communities and the hate crime hoax that perhaps that happened in Chicago with Empire actor Jussie Smollett. In studio, we have Dr. T.A. Warren. He's a retired police officer. And on the line, we have Dr. O'Shane Gatson, assistant professor of the psychology department at Norfolk State University. We have a caller on the line. Let's just jump right into the calls. And they're calling at 757-823-9110. What do you think about this situation? Hello, you're live on the air. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
Aaron Hawkins, calling from Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay, Mr. Hawkins, what is your question or comment?
Well, my comment, being a graduate of Norfolk State University and coming out of the Department of Psychology, I feel as if the young man is needing counsel. He's at a point where he's reaching now, and at a time in society with a lot of different racial disparities, sensitive, he has to be careful with what he's doing or what he's seeking. So as the professor said, Dr. Warren, we have to do a proper assessment of the individual. Then we had to move forward without persecuting him and dealing with other individuals who are in higher positions feeling of a young man.
Interesting. Aaron, thank you so much for that call.
Thank you so much. You have a great one.
Okay, absolutely. So, Dr. Gassie, what do you think about what Aaron said? Maybe reaching out for help. I think you mentioned that as well. Looking for something in need. Again, obviously, as a psychologist, you would obviously have to speak with him personally. But just generally, overall, what do you think about that comment?
I think that comment is spot on. I think oftentimes we all, and sometimes it's more severe depending on the trauma in our developmental history, our experiences, but we all sometimes can act out or behave in ways as a consequence of not having been validated, not feeling loved in our childhood or our development. And so I think it's so important for people of color, and particularly black men and boys, to really take the risk in finding a practitioner who is competent to help them to unpack all of the emotions and all of the experiences that get suppressed, repressed into their psyche that causes such emotional pain. Mm-hmm. I was sitting with a patient just the other day, 17-year-old African-American man, and he had so much trauma around his father and feeling invalidated. He sat there just hitting his hand against his head because he had such rage and such anger and feelings of sadness, and allowing him to really sit with that anger, to express that anger, and to look him in his face and tell him, you know, what your father did or didn't give you is not your fault, that you are worthy and that you are good enough. And as I begin to say that to him, the tears begin to go down his face, because I don't know how often he's even heard that it's not him, that it's not his fault, and that he's worthy. And so I think that many of African Americans and persons of color, and particularly African American men and boys, often get socialized where they don't feel like they have the space to take the risk to unload and to unpack. And so, yes, I think that mental health counseling is a very important step for many of us to take.
And that's important, Dr. Warren, what he was saying. He said rage, anger, shame. And then we see that played out on the streets, where you, I'm sure, saw that in various communities as a police officer.
Yes, like Dr. Gasson said, he was specific, said a male, but that is also male and female also, as what they do not get at home. But a lot of rage, like I said, is played out on the streets in forms of like fighting, breaking and entering. It could be a variety of things, just poor decision making. What it all boils down to when you're looking at the how individuals act out. And in the case of Smollett, he definitely acted out in some type of external way that was just negative, and the picture it does not look good for him right now. Today in the office, one individual came to me and asked me if I had to be in Smollett's defense, what would be the first thing that I would do? I would recommend for him to do. I said the first thing I would recommend him to do is go see a psychologist and get a psychological evaluation. That would be one of the first things I would recommend for him to do, to see if there are underlying issues or something that's going on with him that would assist the investigator or assist his team, his defense team, and mounted some type of defense as far as the accusations that have been made against him. Absolutely.
And we want to hear from you as well, 757-823-9110. What do you think about this as it affects our community, as it affects African-American males and the LBGT community? Do you think that, again, we have to find out more information, but what is your first response when you heard about this situation? And do you simply think he should be taken off the show Empire? We want to know what you think. 757-823-9110, 823-9110. Dr. Gatson, you also talked earlier about belief, and you also mentioned a rush to judgment. Why is it that sometimes when we first hear things, we do rush to judgment? We say, oh, I know he's absolutely guilty, or I don't believe that can be the case. What is it in our thinking that causes us to immediately, without all the facts, rush to judgment?
Wow, that is a great question. When I think about that question, some of the things that initially came to my mind of why we as a society rush to judgment about these topics and issues, one is because some of these stories and topics tap into our own unresolved material that gets triggered, and these issues at times may feed into our own unconscious or conscious biases. So it's sort of like a confirmatory bias. I knew this would happen, or I knew this person would do this, or I knew this had to be true. I think that we also rush to judgment because we, as a country or a society, have been given over to what I call sensational living. Everything is sensational. Everything is a story. And we're off to the next story. We're off to the next thing that brings conversation or debate or some sort of excitement. But I really do think there's something about how many of these stories related to trauma and abuse often do tap into individuals' own unresolved material. Sometimes it mirrors their own abuse, their own experiences of boundary violations, and it gets triggered. And because it gets triggered, of course, as a result of it being triggered, people have all sorts of reactions and opinions that are not just, as we can see, always based in truth or always based in facts, but our emotions get triggered in such a way that we can't sometimes tease things out or deconstruct it because something about this story, something about this experience is similar for me emotionally.
Wow. And that's how we connect on some level, an emotional level with the story. And that's what sometimes can trigger that emotional response. I found that fascinating. We're going to go to the line, and we have a caller. You're live on the air. What is your name, please? And where are you calling from?
Hello?
Yes, you're live on the air. What is your name, please? And where are you calling from?
Hi. My name is Carl. I'm calling from Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Carl, thank you so much for calling. What is your question or comment for our guests?
Well, my comment is in regards to the gentleman you were talking about, the young man that made the false accusations supposedly in Chicago.
Right. In
regards to the attack. You know, I have a statement pretty much, ma'am. The issue here is that as African Americans, you know, when we start banning with all these different groups, you know, the embarrassment becomes on us, not just because they're African American, that he was African American, but he saw an opportunity and he took it. And, you know, a lot of folks are upset for the fact that, well, rush to judgment, this type of thing. I'm being honest with you. What he said never really added up anyway. And most of us know that. But now, you know, the guy pretty much has been caught in a lie, and you still have people that want to defend him. He was wrong for what he did. He took advantage of an opportunity to use a label along with African American and the LGBT movement, and he used it to his advantage for financial gain. He's not the first one. He's not going to be the last one. I'm saying as a group, particularly with African Americans and all that we've been through, we need to be very careful who we band with. This was just a showing that, you know, people will take advantage of any opportunity given, and you know, he made the decision that he needs to deal with it.
Carl, thank you so much for your comments. We appreciate you calling.
All right.
Okay, Dr. Warren, he said take advantage of that opportunity, seizing the moment for a movement, as it were. It could be Black Lives Matter. It could be the LGBTQ community. What do you think about that comment?
I think he's spot on. As a young police officer, I used to always get frustrated when years ago, to date my age now, when they had the Tawana Brawley case back years ago. I used to see the vision like Reverend Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, when those cases would pop in the public's eye. I would always see those guys around. You know, they just, like saying, taking advantage of those opportunities to boost their profile. But yet, when you hear of some 7-year-old kid gets shot in a gunfire, a drive-by shooting, those guys, they never came around. So I agree. When individuals in our society, when they seize opportunities, whether it's for a financial gain, professional gain, whatever it may be. But I agree with individuals do seize opportunities, and we have to be careful in our society and figure out some type of way to deal with those individuals when they do seize opportunities and their faults.
But so in some sense, are you saying you agree a little bit with the police superintendent when he seemed very upset because the average child that's killed in Chicago, we're not hearing about that? Is that what I'm inferring what you're saying? Or?
Yes, the police superintendent, he did make a statement about that. You don't hear about that, but there's much attention because of Smollett, who he is, the attention that he brought to this case from East Coast to West Coast, north to south. Everybody heard about this. Everybody was curious about it. And even various politicians made various statements about it. So when you have individuals that jump on this particular case to seize those opportunities, and with Smollett, by him making those accusations, whether they true or false, that seizes an opportunity, and the police officers could actually put energy elsewhere investigating crimes. And I wish they would put that type of energy elsewhere solving crimes as well. And
Dr. Gadsden, okay, if somebody says, well, he's a celebrity and, all this attention with the celebrity, there's a celebrity mindset. I think it really goes along with that sensational living you're talking about. Okay, he's a celebrity and this is exciting and I watch him on TV and now I'm interested in this. But the little boy that lives on the south side of Chicago, I don't know him. I don't know his mom. I don't know his dad. I don't see him on TV. So why should I care about that?
Yeah. Well, I think this is another complex discussion. I think that on one hand, that there is a level of cultural apathy that sometimes gets triggered or gets seen within our community, that we have endured so many years of oppression, so many years of issues like violence, so many years of misrepresentation, that some in our community do become apathetic about it and almost hopeless about whether or not we can shift the tide. Mm-hmm. But I also want to challenge that and say that we shouldn't give in to a white orientation of thinking about ourselves. And what I mean by that is that there are a number of activists and community leaders that are fighting this fight, that are activists, that are praxis-oriented on a daily basis, that, of course, do not get or enjoy the public scrutiny or the public or the media representation as they should. But I just want to make sure that we don't buy into this insidious idea that black folks don't care about black folk and that there are not people who are giving their lives on a daily basis through the sphere of their influence to shift the conversation and to shift the reality of what's happening in our communities. So I think that we do have to talk about it from that perspective. I do think that there is something, as you said, around the sensationalism that makes us connect a little bit more or become more fascinated with people who, on some level, represent having made it, and we would like to see parts of ourselves within them. And maybe as a result of that, we do center ourselves or have conversations about things that they may encounter or represent in ways that sometimes the regular Joe Blow on the street doesn't get the same attention. But I still just want to caution us in the black community to know that there are people. You mentioned people like, and I'll stop at this last comment, people like Al Sharpton and other people who I do have some differences with, and can see some shifting in how they have represented and branded themselves. But having lived in New York and then visited Al Sharpton's, I forgot what his organization was called, and having talked to people like him, these individuals at some point of their lives, and could be argued even now, did have a heart for people, did take cases and take on cases for the little man or little woman because no one else was able to advocate for them. And so we do have that tradition, and we do have individuals. And I think, last thing, that we have to be careful about this, the caller was talking about, this conflation of Black Lives Matter and other groups, because I think that any group that is fighting against oppression, systematic oppression, needs to not only be heard but supported. because the people within our community are not homogeneous. We have so many different types of black and brown people representing different sexual orientations, different values, and all of those values and all of those identities have to be spoken to, particularly when people are being oppressed in many different ways.
Absolutely. And you just heard from Dr. Gadsden. He's an assistant professor in the psychology department here at Norfolk State University. We're going to take a break now, but when we come back on the other side, we're going to continue this conversation. And I want you to give us a call at 757-823-9110. We're talking about hate crimes in the African American and LBGT communities and the alleged hate crime hoax in Chicago. This is Hot 91.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the Jussie Smollett case in Chicago, allegedly filing a false police report claiming that he was the victim of a hate crime attack in Chicago. In studio, we have Dr. T.A. Warren, retired police officer, and on the phone, Dr. Gadsden, assistant professor of psychology here at NSU. We're going to go to the phones. We have a caller on the line. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
My name is Pam. I'm calling from Virginia Beach.
Okay, Pam, what is your question or comment?
I have a question and a comment. I know that this young man, he's an actor. Could it be that he's experiencing something that is psychological, something that's going on with him? And could it be that he's still in a state where he feels like he's pretending, but is actually in the real world, and he's not realizing what is going on?
So he thinks he's still acting out there in the real world?
Right. Can he have something going on psychological that it hasn't been addressed yet or something?
Interesting.
Yeah, because it seemed like something isn't right with him psychologically.
Wow.
Yeah, but my heart goes out to him because when I heard of it, I was like, oh, please say it isn't so. Say it isn't so, that the things that was coming out wasn't true.
Right.
And it was we're very heartfelt and sadness. So, but I just wish him well.
Pam, thank you for that. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you and take care. I enjoy your show.
Thank you so much. Dr. Gadsden, we had and Dr. Warren, we had mentioned that a little bit before, that perhaps this is a situation, a cry for help, as you mentioned sometimes. What do you think about, Dr. Gadsden, what Pam said?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think Dr. Warren, he does a lot of more assessments than I do, can speak to it from that perspective. But, we don't have enough evidence. It doesn't seem like he's in a dissociative state. That could be a reason, bout of dissociation. It doesn't look like, we don't have enough information to say he's in a psychosis or a bipolar manic episode. Those are some of the types of mental presentations that could have an individual acting in bizarre ways that they might not normally behave in. But I haven't heard enough information or heard any information that might suggest that is what's going on.
And I agree with Dr. Gaston that has not been a lot of information put out yet. However, his defense they're going to have to mount some type of defense against this. I think I can say with reasonable probability that his defense is more than likely probably going to request a couple of continuances to possibly look at a defense, possibly of getting doing some type of psychological evaluation as they mount a defense and viewing that he possibly was not in his true state of mind, that he had some issues going on in which he really believed that incident was not that incident was real to him. So I think that there'll be something that I think his defense should look at doing that. Again, I said it earlier, I'll go back and say it again, that I think they possibly look at some type of mental health, some type of psychological evaluation to assist in their defense as far as moving forward with him.
And Dr. Warren, from a criminal perspective, why is this so damaging for Smollett?
It's damaging for, first, credibility.
Okay.
It's damaging for him for credibility. And then you have to look at the people come after him. When other individuals from the LGBTQ community come with the same similar case, or they go to the police, will they be, like Dr. Guy said earlier, believable? Will that police officer take the time or say, well, here we go, here's another one.
Here's another
There's
one.
another one. Or not necessarily that. If it's some type of other racial type of case, will those detectives say, oh, here's another one? Not necessarily in Chicago, but all across the country. Mm-hmm. So that's not necessarily just happens in Chicago. It's a rippling effect to that particular case. So what Jussie Smollett did, he damages victims' credibility all across the board.
And in my research and reading and looking at videos and so forth, and that is some of the information that they were saying, that now a victim may be hesitant to come forward or they won't be believed. And that's part of the damage and the effects to the Black community and the LGBT community. And that's such an important part. So what do you think about that? 757-823-9110. We're talking about the Jussie Smollett case in Chicago, but the broader conversation is how it affects our community. Give us a call at 757-823-9110. So Dr. Gatson, as Pam was saying, looking at maybe she didn't want to, and that was a little bit interesting what she said. She said, she didn't want to believe it. She felt sorry for him and so forth. And instead of, oh, I know he probably did it. You know how people are. I found that kind of interesting that she said she didn't really rush to judgment, as we kind of mentioned that before. So I found that fascinating. So, Dr. Gatson, that was one example, of course, that it turned around the other way. But I did find it fascinating when you were talking about, she was talking about the psychological issues and those things that are important there. But also, as you say, you see it in terms of African-American men and those issues, and that is so important. And that's a connection with that as well, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I think one part of your question or your comment that stuck to me, and I was thinking about our tendency or our hope that this was a hoax, because we already carry a lot of cultural, how should I say it, damage as it relates to racism and other issues and how folks perceive us already. And many within our community certainly didn't want to be connected to or have something that further gave folks that have negative ideas about us more ammunition. But I do think that the second piece to your question around the mental health issue, and men, and masculinity, and when you think about it from an intersectional perspective, right, because he's carrying a number of identities. He is not only a black male, so that's the gender, but is also carrying race, the racial categorization of blackness or being an African American, and then the sexual orientation. All of these identities have an oppressive element to it.
Wow.
Now, there are some theorists and academics who would like you to believe that black men have privilege as it relates to their gender.
Right.
And in some ways that is true, and in some ways that is false. It is true that black men, perhaps as it relates to the social hierarchy, are closer in proximity to the privilege of maleness like white males. But that closer to proximity is not the same thing as being in proximity of it.
Being
right?
in the group, there's a difference. You're not really in the group, right?
So black men, or theorists who talk about black men being patriarchal or black men having privilege, I don't know. In a systemic way, when we think about it as a system of oppression, I would disagree. And so I would say that many times black men are impacted by what we call gendered racism, and that people are seeing them or responding to them based on their negative perceptions of not only their race, but their gender. And so stereotypes like dangerous, stereotypes like criminal, stereotypes like lazy are also associated to black masculinity. So I think that when we think about it from an intersectional perspective, that's probably for many why so many individuals are so up in arm in our community about this, because here you have an individual who represents a number of oppressed identities who, if this is true, is in many people's minds setting us back because now who's going to believe us, right? Who's going to take us serious? And if you have an individual or have individuals who have these multiple oppressed identities already that they're living and trying to navigate, this situation for many seems like it just makes things worse for us. So I do think we have to not only talk about the psychology of black masculinity and the intersectionality that black men walk with individually, but we have to think about this on a cultural level as well. Like, what does this mean for us? What are we carrying as a culture? What the psychology of our culture, our unresolved issues related to these intersections, and how are we going to speak to them?
And that really is related to something that you had said, Dr. Warren, because it's almost like now you have this opportunity to be a great spokesperson or a poster child, as it were, for these communities, for these causes. And then you go and squander the opportunity. And now when the cases come back around, as you said, nobody will care. Fewer people might not care, I should say it that way, or they may not be believed, unfortunately.
That's the beauty of, police departments across the country. We have a tendency, and I say we because I am a retired police officer, that we have a tendency, we should take each case individually and move forth versus, and do not let, police officers should not allow one case to hinder their thought and their ability to perform the next case, because we go from case to case. So therefore, they should be able to understand what happened in this case and move on to the next case and clear all biases out. Does that happen? No, it does not, because individually we base our experiences on how we move toward the next case and how we deal with the next case, because when you start hearing these things that does not sound right because of previous experiences, then you say, wow, this doesn't sound right. Let me dig more into this to see to develop more truth. And at that point, we have a tendency to let our case evolve into an actual and factual case. So police officers should actually move from case to case without bringing that bad information from the next case as they move forward.
Absolutely. And so we're talking to, that is Dr. T.A. Warren, a retired police officer, as you heard him say, and Dr. O'Shane Gatson, assistant professor of psychology department at Norfolk State. We're talking today about the Jussie Smollett case in Chicago, but we're also talking about how all of this affects us in terms of hate crimes, how it affects the LGBTQ community, and how it affects the African American community. What are your thoughts on that? Give us a call at 757-823-9110. Do you think that he has hurt our community? In case these are false accusations, what do you think in terms of the male psyche and looking at it from that perspective as well? 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome to Hot 91, Hampton Roads Voices. I'm Benita Adams. And tonight we're talking about hate crimes in the African American and LGBT community and the hate crime hoax. You probably obviously have heard by now the Empire actor Jussie Smollett was arrested for allegedly filing a false police report claiming that he was the victim of a hate crime in Chicago. And we're talking about that today. Now, in studio, we have Dr. T.A. Warren, who's a retired police officer. And on the line, we have Dr. O'Shane Gatson, an assistant professor in the psychology department here at Norfolk State University. Now, Dr. Gatson, I know that you have to go, but any final thoughts from your perspective about this particular case and even how it affects the larger community?
Yes. Once again, I want to thank you for allowing me to share with you on tonight, and Dr. Warren. I do want to say that this is, as we've talked about, a very complex and intersectional issue, and that people in our community, I hope that we will continue to support those individuals who come out with stories of victimization in a way that doesn't presume guilt until we have all the information. I also hope and pray that we as a community will see issues in an intersectional manner. In other words, that although race is very salient for us and continues to be very salient for us, that as individuals we all also have other multiple identities that are also important to us. And when I think about black progressive movements, I think about the ability to take in the other, regardless of social location, and identity, and for us to fight for one another and stand for one another regardless of sexual orientation, class, educational background, or religious affiliation. And lastly, I'd like to just continue to support the idea that mental health and spiritual health is so important, and that it's important that if you find yourself in issues where you feel sad or depressed or anxious or confused about your sense of self or selfhood, that you seek out a competent clinician of color, someone who is able to see you, that mirrors you, and is able to help you through the process of healing.
Absolutely. Where can they find you? Any contact information you'd like to give them?
Yes. Currently I'm practicing through Christian Psychotherapy Services in Norfolk, Virginia. And if you are in need of a therapist, you can certainly call 757-622-2114, 757-622-2114. And for those that might need services like consultation, workshops, seminars, that I facilitate on a number of topics, you can reach my website at www.oshangadsdenphd.com. Again, www.oshangadsdenphd.com.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gadsden. Dr. Gadsden, Assistant Professor, the Psychology Department here at Norfolk State University. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
And we're continued here with Dr. T.A. Warner, retired police officer. I found that very interesting, some of the things that Dr. Gadsden said. He was talking about black progressive movements. And that's what we had talked about before the break in terms of when something like this happens, there's a possibility, not that it does, but there's a possibility that perhaps it can hurt some of the progress that has already been made, and I found that very interesting. But he also mentioned stories of victimization and how those stories are so important for us to continue to hear them and believe a person when they say, because he had talked about belief, when you hear that, at least consider it, think about it, because there are many victims out there who have been traumatized and they have not fabricated stories at all.
And that is one of the bigger concerns in our society. You have a lot of victims out there, and very few of them come forth with their story, and they live with that trauma for years. And in time, the trauma eventually is going to impact them some way, especially when you're being traumatized, when the repeated trauma is this compound on top of each other. The trauma is eventually going to be externalized in some form. And usually trauma is externalized in forms of depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance abuse, excessive physical aggression, poor decision making. So that trauma is externalized in some type of form, which would ultimately affect that individual and other individuals around that person. So, like Dr. Guy said, mental health is definitely treatment is definitely one of the better options to help individuals deal with that way. But again, we cannot continue to victimize the victim.
Right.
When those things occur, they should go into the police and be given a fair just. Listen to them. And give them fair justice and present their case and investigate their case. And if it's false, then we move forward. And if it's accurate, then you just continue to move forward. But regardless, you just have to give them their fair chance to hear their story. Their fair chance, which I love that. And do you think that we gave Jussie Smollett his fair chance? 757-823-9110. What are your thoughts on that? Did we rush to judgment? Or now that we have heard that he has been arrested, are we assuming that perhaps that rush to judgment wasn't really rushing, that it was correct? Give us a call, 757-823-9110. We're going to be joined on the line in just a minute by Dr. Ernestine Duncan. She's the chair of the Psychology Department at Norfolk State University. Norfolk State University, and she's going to be joining us in just a moment. And right now, again, we still have Dr. T.A. Warren, a retired police officer. So again, give us a call, 757-823-9110. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back after this.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, this is Hampton Roads Voices. And today we're talking about hate crimes in the African American community and the LBGT community. Now we're being joined by, on the line, Dr. Ernestine Duncan. She's the chair of the psychology department here at Norfolk State University. Dr. Duncan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Good evening, and thank you again for having me.
Oh, definitely. It's been a wonderful conversation so far. And again, we invite our listeners to call us at 757-823-9110. What do you think about the case of the Empire actor Jussie Smollett, who's allegedly filing a fake police report about being a victim of a hate crime? Do you have any experience with that? Was there a situation that you can let us know about? Give us a call, 757-823-9110. So, Dr. Duncan, we've been talking about overall hate crimes, and we've been looking at the Smollett case very, very specifically. But one of the things that your colleague said, Dr. Gatson, who was with us during the first hour, is he's talked about, and Dr. Warren and I were talking about this during the break, about the stories of the victims and really listening to their stories in terms of what they're saying and what they're talking about.
Yes.
Have you found that to be the case, Dr. Duncan?
I do find that to be the case. I think that many times we get caught up in the sensationalism of the story, and we don't really listen to the underlying causes, the underlying factors that may actually be a cry for help, might be a cry for some attention.
Wow.
But we need to listen with the ear that lets us hear what's really going on with those who are the victims.
A cry for help. We're going to go to the phones. We have two callers. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
Yes, I am calling from Maryland. My name is Robert Johnson.
Oh, Mr. Johnson. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was just thinking about the possibility that perhaps Jussie Smollett is not lying about this. They mentioned something about a check that was dated the 23rd, which was approximately 6 days before the incident.
Right.
Is it possible that the two guys, well, we all know that they all knew each other, and we know that the two guys are brothers, okay?
Right.
So is it possible that that check was written to one of the guys for possibly drugs or possibly something else that had nothing to do with this incident, and maybe when one of the brothers or both of the brothers got caught, they decided that they were going to come up with this story and say that Jussie Smollett was in on it from the beginning.
Interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. Mr. Johnson, I'm going to give that and ask our guest about that. Thank you so much for calling.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We have another caller on the line. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from? Okay. So what do you think about that, Dr. Warner, when he said that there was a check involved, which we know that part of the story? Maybe there was something else to it.
Again, all the facts have not come out of court. The superintendent, he presented a variety of pieces of evidence on camera. But again, until it comes out in court and we put it all together, it's very possible that it could be true that he may not have been lying. So again, that's why I said at the beginning of the show, we need to wait till all of the facts come out and then we pass judgment at that particular point.
Very interesting. And Dr. Duncan, I want to go back to a point that you had made in terms of sometimes we hear about things and the stories or people acting out because it is a cry for help. And I find that very interesting because when Dr. Gatson made some final remarks, he was saying that many times we need to realize that we need to be mentally and spiritually healthy. And sometimes people are not. And it comes out, it comes out in many ways and even in ways like this.
Agreed. I think one of the things that hasn't been talked about as much is the context and the times. Right now, when you look at the increase or the prevalence of hate crimes, they have actually increased about 17%, mostly in larger cities, but about 17% in since the 45th president has been in office. And that was something that I looked into in preparation for tonight's conversation.
Interesting.
And so the times are really ripe for the possibility for things like this to happen, whether we look at it from the context of it actually happening or the context of how believable it would be given the times. So I think that's another conversation that needs to be had, and that is what's going on right now in the context in which we live that make this a reality, make this more of a possibility.
And I think that's such a important part and piece of this conversation, that something is going on in the community, in society, in the world, as it were, here in the U.S., that makes these things, you said a 17% increase. And so I think that is such an important piece, that even whether this is true or not true, but if it is not true, how one would think, okay, this is what I'm going to say. This is what I'm going to say that has happened. This is what I will accuse them of, because it fits right in with what's going on out here in the world. So, Dr. Duncan, I find that fascinating that you said that. So what do you think about that? What do you think? Call us at 757-823-9110. We have a caller on the line. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
This is Robert calling from Virginia Beach.
Robert, thank you for calling. What is your question or comment for our guest?
Yes, I'm listening to the conversation, and Dr. Duncan just made some very strong points, as Dr. Warren. But this is what really gets my goat. Why is it now a problem with all gays, all blacks, when one of our members in our community make a mistake or commit a crime? When something happens in the white community, I don't hear people go online and say, well, all white people, this put all white people at a disadvantage. So when we produce this narrative, doesn't that help marginalize us as a people?
I'm going to throw that to Dr. Duncan first. Dr. Duncan, thank you so much for the call. And what do you think about that? Saying, okay, now that he's gay and black and male, now it's on all of us. But when white folks do it, it's like, oh, well, you know. What do you think about that, Dr. Duncan?
I think that the caller, Robert, I think that was Dr. Robert Perkins, he makes a very good point, and that is there are times when, as a community, we are not as cohesive, we are not as supportive of each other as we can be. And again, I'd have to go back to the context of the times. As a people of color, African American people, we have tended to be more collectivist. That is, we support each other. We understand that because I am, therefore you are. And with that, there is a level of community and support among us. But trends have shown that we have begun to adopt a more westernized way of thinking and interacting with each other, which is more individualistic. And so rather than having because I am, therefore you are, we're more like whatever I have, I cannot have because you may threaten it. And so therefore we become adversaries with each other as opposed to allies. And so if there are ways that we can differentiate ourselves or put ourselves in a different position from someone else who we could otherwise regard as a brother or sister, we're going to be more inclined to do that.
I find that fascinating that you say that, Dr. Duncan, and Dr. Warren as well, that we were more of a community, more communal as opposed to individualistic. And now perhaps that makes it easier to say, oh, look, you did that over there and you did that over there, but not togetherness, the community.
I agree with Dr. Duncan. It's definitely our way of thinking. I guess the question I have for Dr. Duncan is approximately how far back would we say that method of thinking has been changing? Is it 2 years ago, 4 years ago, or 10 years ago? Have we been progressing toward thinking more individualistic?
Dr. Duncan?
Yes, I would say that probably We're hearing about it more and more, but this is something that has probably been a trend that we've been seeing for decades. I can remember, and again, I heard Dr. Warren earlier saying he was dating himself by talking about Tawana Brawley. I'm well aware of the Tawana Brawley case as well. But during that time, and growing up as I did in Brooklyn, New York, families were more connected with families, connected with neighbors, and we were collectivists as we tend to be. However, I could see even as early as the 70s when things like that began to kind of differentiate. And I would say that since that time till now, that has become an increasing problem in communities of color.
Very interesting. Again, we're talking here on Hampton Roads Voices. We love to hear from you. 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the Jussie Smollett case, but as it relates to the larger African-American community, we are looking at and having our guest here in the studio. We have Dr. T.A. Warren, a retired police officer, and we've been joined on the line from Dr. Ernestine Duncan, a chair of the psychology department here at Norfolk State University. And we've heard from you as well, but we want to hear more. 757-823-9110. How do you think about Jussie and this case? Do you think in terms of, he's a celebrity and things are different for him? What do you think about this in general? 823-9110. It was interesting, Dr. Duncan and Dr. Warren, we were talking about while we're over the break, we looked at two separate concepts. We were saying almost what I had called the scarcity mentality, thinking, oh no, here's this celebrity, he has enough, and no, it's almost unfair, but thinking there's not enough to go around. And then also, Dr. Duncan, you were talking about the individualistic concept and thoughts that we have now. Talk a little bit, please, Dr. Warren, about what we were saying about the scarcity mentality and how it really does relate to this.
We were talking about that individuals, sometimes you actually, when you just look at the individuals as the thinking, we look at how am I going to be successful. If I'm trying to climb the ladder of success as an African-American male, I should be able to pull up other African-American male with me. I shouldn't have to worry about another African-American male trying to pull me down or get that group think, well, this group going to pull me down, so let me go out there on my own. It's all like the concept, the analogy, the crab in the pot. When one crab is trying to get out, the other ones are pulling them back down and they're keeping them there. So I think that's an unfair judgment for me to even want to think like that. But is it a reality that I have to worry about someone else pulling me back down instead of the individual trying to climb with me? Like we discussed earlier, if I am a leader, I obviously once a great follower.
Right.
So now that eventually when I move over to the side, that follower becomes the leader and the next person comes beside him. So that is a concept that I think we as African American men and we just as a whole, as people in general, should try to gravitate toward that to try to lift everyone up.
So do you think that we were thinking that way, Dr. Duncan, in terms of this Smollett case, that he is a celebrity, he's making a lot of money, therefore I don't have to feel sorry for him. That's why I can rush to judgment. What do you think about that part?
Well, I've heard and I've seen that there are many who feel as though if this was an attempt to, he wasn't happy with his salary. I think that's what I've heard and read.
Yes.
He wasn't happy with his salary. And his salary is reported to be about $65,000 per episode. And I actually read some responses of people who said, what is that to be unhappy about? And so given that, I don't have sympathy for this guy. So people are definitely reacting to his celebrity. They are definitely reacting to how much money he earns. And in a way, they don't have any empathy for whatever situation he may have with that crabs in a barrel mentality, such that, well, look at what he's making, look at what he's doing. I'd be happy to make that. I'd be happy to do that. So therefore, I don't have any sympathy for whatever causes he may have.
And that in itself is a bias in our community and in our society. And going back to what you said, Dr. Warner, I don't want you to have more than me. I don't want you to have more than me. That is a part of, as Dr. Duncan said, some of the, what you call it, 17% of what's increasing in terms of what's going on with racial issues and the like.
It is, and when we look at that, because he having not having sympathy, I think that we as police officers, as investigators, they have to be careful also not to gravitate toward that thought process also, and basically investigate just the case and not worry about his celebrity status. And even though he allegedly cost the city a lot of money, if it turns out to be true, then they have to backtrack on their steps, on the things that they said about him. So I think we have to be very careful on how they articulate the facts of the case, and understand that he is human, and he if he made a mistake, he made a mistake. If he's telling the truth, he's telling the truth. So the police department have to be very careful. And again, grab to facts. Let's stick to the facts of the case, and let's not let this individual be tried by the public and the media and things of that nature.
So, Dr. Duncan, how do we not try with all of the social media that we have and all the television stations and radio stations and everything online? How do we not try a person before they're actually tried in court? What do we do?
That is a very good question, because kind of by nature, we tend to do that.
We do.
Tend to do that in our interpersonal relationships, and we clearly tend to do that with people that are more distant from us. I remember that during his part of the interview, Dr. Gadsden talked about just that overall spiritual, mental, overall health and well-being. And when we are centered and when we are self-focused, it takes enough energy to do that and stay that way, which would keep us then from being so critical of other people. I know that our ancestors talked a little bit about, if I took the time to take care of my own front door, I wouldn't be worrying about yours. And so I think that one of the things that we can do is just maintain our own integrity, our honesty, those things that keep us balanced. And in doing that, we can then be more accurate in our perceptions of other people. We could also be more caring, and we could be more loving towards each other, which is something I think that criticism and that crabs in a barrel comes from us feeling somewhat insecure from time to time and feeling as though we don't have the necessary skill set or tools to get what it is the other person is getting, and thinking that it's not going to be fair and we need to take it because it wouldn't actually be given to us. But if we're confident about our self-worth, if we're feeling competent that we can accomplish those things that we would want to accomplish, it would make us then feel secure to the point that we wouldn't be threatened by other people's success.
That's right. 757-823-9110. We're talking generally about the Jussie Smollett case in Chicago, but we're talking about it as a larger perspective as well, in terms of thinking that we don't want to have other people to be more successful than us, looking at it as it affects the African-American community. What do you think about that? 757-823-9110. But I could hear, Dr. Warren, someone saying, oh, but he has, as almost like Dr. Duncan said, but he has all that money and success and fame, and, what does he possibly have to worry about?
Well, again, his fame has nothing to do with the case. It should not have nothing to do with the case. I would say that. And we talked about earlier about rushing to judgment.
Right.
I said earlier that during the break we talked about people rushing to judgment.
Yes.
We as a society, we want answers. We want them quick. We want results right then. We as a society, Americans are known as impatient people. They want the results fast. I did a tour in Afghanistan, and one thing that the Taliban said that this is our country. We are patient. We will wait you out. Can you outlast us over the years? And
wow.
It's been 19 years over there, and we still fight that fight. And the Taliban is still there.
And they're still there.
And they're still there. So how long can will we wait them out? And going back to the seer, can we be patient, and can we wait and give Jussie Smollett his fair due chance in court? Can we be patient and say, fine, let's just step back and let the evidence come out? And as police officers, not present show the world our feelings on how they personalized it as an attack on Chicago, which I felt that, and I believe that I don't think that it was an attack on the city of Chicago at all. as the superintendent presented that. I thought that was just a false representation of just to say an attack on Chicago, because it was not an attack or a personal assault on the city of Chicago.
Dr. Gadsden, why are we so quick to judgment, and why don't we want to wait sometimes?
Is that for Dr. Duncan? Is that for me?
Dr. Duncan. Excuse me. I said
I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Dr.
The
Duncan.
question again, and I am sorry. What was the question?
Oh, no, I said, why do we rush to judgment? Why aren't we willing to wait and let it unfold naturally and sometimes slowly?
Well, I think that, as Dr. Warren said, we are very quick to judgment. We want answers. We want decisions right away, even when we don't have all of the necessary information. There are, constantly we hear people say, well, if I had known that, and that's after the fact. And so many times we make our judgments hastily. We make them prematurely. And in doing so, it just serves the purpose also to make us feel better about ourselves in judgment against someone else.
So I wonder also, I'm going to stay with you, Dr. Duncan. I wonder, you were talking about the 17% increase of hate crimes since this administration. And I wonder the thinking perhaps around Jussie when he decided to make this both a hate crime. Again, we know everything's alleged, hate crime and a crime against the LGBT community. Is it because that is what is on the minds of many people at this time, and it would fit well into an accusation, or because he represents both of those communities?
Again, I'm glad that we keep saying that these are alleged and that we don't want to judge prematurely like many are inclined to do. But I do know that the times and the context of the time that we live in right now, those are very prevalent issues. They are issues that carry a lot of emotion with them. And we're talking about them now more than we've ever talked about them before. And with this increase in us becoming more individualistic, I think that it just set the tone for this to be something that could be believable if, in fact, it's not true.
Okay. So
also, we also don't know his experience. Dr. Gadsden talked about the intersectionality of being an African-American male, being an African-American male who is a celebrity, being an African-American male who is gay. We don't know the experiences that he has encountered that have led up to this. So that, again, if this may have not happened a few weeks ago, maybe something like it happened a while ago.
Right.
And it was a part of his experience.
And we know, excuse me for interrupting you, and we know that it's a part of someone's experience. That's the whole point. Whether or not it happened as he said it or happened when he said it, it's happening. And we know that. And that's why this is still important, because it can start and continue a conversation that needs to take place anyway. So we are talking about the Jussie Smollett case, but we're also looking at it as a larger issue that's happening in our community. And we'd love to hear from you. 757-823-9110. Give us a call, 823-9110. This is Hot 91, Hampton Roads Voices.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, hi everybody, I'm Benita Adams, and we're joined today in the studio by Dr. T.A. Warren, retired police officer, and on the line we have the chair of the psychology department here at Norfolk State University, Dr. Ernestine Duncan. And we're talking about the Jussie Smollett case as it relates to hate crimes and also in the African American community, how it's affected our community as well as the LGBT community. Now, Dr. Duncan, during the break, you brought up something very interesting in terms of how this case can be connected to the stereotypes of black men with the Susan Smith case, correct, years ago?
That is correct.
Tell us a little bit about that and make the connection for us.
Okay, again, dating myself, around 1994, a white woman by the name of Susan Smith in South Carolina said that her 2 children were abducted, and she believed that they were killed by a black man.
Wow.
And there was a manhunt put out for several days. Everybody empathized and believed her to be telling the truth. And it took a few weeks for them to realize that things were not adding up and that she was, in fact, responsible for the murder of her 2 children. One was 3 and one was 14 months old. And she basically took her car to a body of water, and she let it go into the water. She got out of the car, and her sons drowned. And it showed us that people were willing to believe, in the absence of any real credible evidence, the stereotypes that we believe about black men. And it was very likely that this man had taken her children and had killed them. Here we are now, 1994, 20, 30 years later, and again, black men are still being looked at through the stereotype of, again, being guilty without any due process. And I just think that's a very interesting thing to consider in this conversation, and that is how much are the stereotypes of African Americans, of African American men, being used to color the lens or the view of how we see them in terms of innocence and our guilt.
Absolutely, absolutely, in terms of innocence or guilt, without hearing all, as Dr. Warren, you've said all evening, without hearing those facts and knowing about them. And yet, just as Dr. Duncan said, we do look through the lens of stereotypical thinking, and we go, probably he's guilty, probably this one over here isn't guilty. And yet you've reiterated over and over again the way it should be done in terms of police investigations, that you really need to take it case by case.
And we go back to the Susan case, is like the superintendent said, that's good old-fashioned police work, where those investigators, they stayed on the case and not, as they say, if you look at our history years ago, a lot of African Americans were in prison under false accusation, under just insufficient evidence.
That's right.
But good police work, actually, old-fashioned police work, actually allowed them to solve that case and realize that she was guilty of murdering her own kids. So when we look at the police officers, we have to make sure police officers have to make sure they clear all their own personal biases out, and not look at African American men when they come into the office as a possible suspect as guilty before they actually do a complete and thorough investigation. So again, that will go back to just different police training to make sure police officers are trained in that aspect to resolve their own personal biases as they move forward.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a tiny bit, and I want to say, but is that possible, and does that really happen in the police force, that it does not go through these biases? I mean, they don't not use the lens of their own biases, and that there is some stereotyping going on. Is it possible to get past that?
It is possible to get past that. However, it requires a lot of training. I mean, a lot of training. But does it happen? Yes. When I was a police officer, I saw it happen. Police officers have biases, but the individuals have to be able to open themselves up and recognize their biases as they move forth. And I think now police departments are trying to weed those guys out that has those biases and come there and want to prosecute individuals based on the color of their skin. The police departments attempt to weed those individuals out, but they still have them there. And again, it's a long process, and they probably will always be there. But again, did I see it when I was there? Yes, I did. Did the case get resolved the right way? Yes, it did. So I think as individual police officers, when they see things like that, they need to speak up and not just let it go through the cracks, because those things become historical and it continues to haunt police departments for years to come.
So, and I completely agree with that, because now at least there is some improvement. There are some steps that perhaps weren't even in the thinking or the mindset, or some training that wasn't in the thinking or the mindset 25 years ago, 35 years ago. And now at least, although it's not where we want it to be, it's a lot better than where it was. I
agree. Training has gotten a lot better for police officers for recognizing their own biases, unconscious biases, and things of that nature, implicit biases as well. So I think with Norfolk Police Department, Chief Boone, he's real strict with his officers and making them recognize the implicit biases and trying to develop an effective and efficient police department.
Absolutely. And so, Dr. Duncan, that makes me think to ask the question, how, if at all, in a positive way, has this case moved the conversation forward?
Well, clearly, radio shows and discussions such as this, we start the conversation, and hopefully it will carry. After today, people will have this conversation with people in their household, people in the classroom, people at their churches, and we'll begin to have an honest conversation about this. Secondly, as Dr. Warren is saying, it really takes individuals looking at the possible biases that we may hold, admitting that we may hold some, and looking at those. One of the things psychologists are trained is to admit that we are social beings. We are in communities, we are in contexts where there are things that happen and we experience, and we may possibly have reactions to those, and we may hold some biases. That's just a part of being human. But what is the responsible thing then is to explore the bias and to ensure that you do not act out of the bias.
And I don't want us to end our conversation assuming that the bias always comes from someone outside of our own community or outside of our own race. Biases can be with one another in the same community.
Oh, my goodness. I'm going to go ahead and do a little self-disclosure here. I am a dark-skinned male.
Okay.
And growing up, I had issue with light-skinned men because I felt that I could not get ahead because of them, that they were the color of preference, internal color preference. So when I became a police officer, I externalized that by when I put over a light-skinned male, if he did something, I would write him a ticket, simply because of my bias. But after about a year or so, I started to recognize that just was not the way I should conduct and continue my career. And by me taking an introspective of myself and looking at that, I realized that was wrong, and it stopped.
Yeah.
But again, you have to be able to recognize that that's a bias, and again, it's an inter-race bias.
It is.
That I had. So it is very possible, and it's still probably ongoing, that individuals have interracial biases, and until you actually engage those, you will continue to exploit them and probably ruin other people's lives.
Oh, absolutely. And what do you think about that, the biases that can happen in our own community? Give us a call, 757-823-9110. In terms of the Jussie Smollett case, what are your thoughts on that? Give us a call, 757-823-9110. This is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and we've been talking today about the Jussie Smollett case, the actor from Empire, and he allegedly made a false report in terms of being a victim of a hate crime as a black gay male. In our studio, we are still joined by Dr. T.A. Warren, retired police officer, and on the line, Dr. Ernestine Duncan, the chair of the psychology department here at Norfolk State University. And we were looking at, in terms of the possible benefits, I mean, that sounds odd, but anything positive to even come out of this situation. Dr. Warner, what do you think? I asked Dr. Duncan that. Anything that you could see from a policing aspect, or as a African American male aspect, or the LGBT community, anything positive in terms of this situation at all, or nothing at all, perhaps positive?
I think the one thing positive is that we need to just become more aware of issues that individuals are, internal issues that individuals are possibly dealing with, to make us do certain things. So I think if we deal with those issues as a whole, as a community, we could possibly improve a lot of different areas. I think that's only a positive thing. It's just individuals' mental health issues.
Okay. And perhaps does this, Dr. Duncan, shed light at all on the need, and even Dr. Gatson had talked about this, the need to be spiritually, emotionally healthy, and shining a light on the need perhaps to get mental health and have a mental health professional?
I would agree 100%. I feel, again, I mean, each of us can probably cite an incident that we have experienced within the last 30 days that we would feel was either racist or sexist or classist in some way. And there's a body of literature that looks at some of the effects of these everyday experiences, microaggressions that occur that impact us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I shared with my class the other day that sometimes people can't win with me when I'm in a store. If you won't wait on me, I attribute it to race.
Wow.
If you follow me around in the store, I attribute it to race. So either way, I'm going to be stressed out because of how I'm perceived in some stores that I go into. And so when you have those experiences day in and day out, and again, they're becoming increasingly relevant to us because we're hearing about more of them, this increase in hate crimes.
Yes.
They are having an impact on us. And so clearly there are some things that we need to do in terms of having conversations, in talking to our children, in talking to our family members, in talking to our students on ways that we can cope with these events that are happening and that could possibly be having an impact on us psychologically.
And what are some of the ways that we can cope? Some practical ABC 1, 2, 3 type things.
But one, I think it's the conversation. Many times we just hold these things in, feeling as though we're the only one who's dealing with it or that we're making too much of the situation. But really being honest that these are things that bother us. And that's what we do as individuals. And then what we do for those who we come into contact with is having a listening ear about that. Because, again, many of us have experienced different things. It may be for different reasons. I may experience it because I'm female, and someone else might experience it because they're male.
That's right.
But nonetheless, we're walking away with an experience that leads us to be stressed, and it can have very deleterious effects on our health, our mental health, and what we're finding is our physical health.
Yes.
And I use this example to talk about the fact that we need to be empathic towards Jussie Smollett. This is the story that we are all talking about in regards to this show. But he is either a young man who has experienced a very threatening and vile offense, or he is a man who has reached to very low depths to bring attention to himself. And either of those situations suggests to me that there is some attention and some care and some healing that needs to be extended to him.
That is so well put, that whether it happened or it didn't happen, in somewhere in his life, and many other people who are listening to us, many other people here in Hampton Roads or other parts of the country, they have experienced those kinds of things. And as you said, Dr. Duncan, it could be because you're female. It could be because you're older. It could be because you're dark skinned. It could be because you're gay. It could be because you're male. There's so many factors that we have to look at that I so appreciate your saying that in essence, we need to pour in the oil and the wine and hear what this person is saying and why he and others, not just Jussie Smollett, but why he and others are crying out for help and what we could do as a community to gather around them and to listen, as you said, and to have that very important, maybe difficult conversation. I agree with you. Dr. Warren.
Yeah, I agree also. I think, like you said one key thing to gather around as a community. Because we have so many different biases in individuals, you have to understand we're individuals who are a straight male want to gather around someone in a LGBT community to help support them because of their own internal biases. Like you said in the break, that I think that we all have to take an introspective of ourselves and be brutally honest with ourselves. Like I said, I can lie to you, I can lie to him and everybody else, but you cannot lie to yourself. I think once you take a deep introspective of self and understand and recognize your biases, it will allow you to develop as an individual and become a more full and healthier individual. And then you will be able to gravitate to communities such as the LGBT community because you have a comfort zone within yourself and you can engage those individuals, whether they are African American, whether they're Caucasian, whether they are a member from an Aryan nation, or whoever they may be. But I think once you engage your own personal biases, it would definitely allow you to go out and progress and do great things in the world.
Absolutely. So we're almost finished and wrapping at the end of the show. But Dr. Duncan, any final points, any final thoughts as this case or the larger conversation?
Again, just to reiterate what my colleague, Dr. Gadsden, said, and that just to recognize the importance of the balance of our spiritual, our mental, and our physical health, and to be concerned about that for ourselves as well as that of our brothers and sisters, and to operate in love. Operate in love.
Yes,
Dr. Warren, last points.
Let's be open about all conversations, regardless of what group the individual is from. Be open to them and be willing to help.
Be willing to help. And Dr. Duncan, contact information, how can they find you?
They can find me right here in Norfolk State, Brown Hall. I'm in Suite 216, and my email address is simply eduncan@nsu.edu.
Wonderful. And Dr. Warren?
They can contact them at TERNARIAN@yahoo.com.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I so appreciate our conversation today, and we have heard from, that was Dr. T.A. Warren, a retired police officer, and also on the line, Dr. Ernestine Duncan, chair of the psychology department here at NSU. Earlier, we heard from Dr. O'Shan Gadsden. He's an assistant professor also in the psychology department at Norfolk State University. And so this conversation is important because, as we said, there are many biases. There are many ways in which people may not treat you right. But we need to rally around each other. We need to listen. We need to open our ears, open our hearts, and we need to say, what is going on in your world? Perhaps I can at least understand what you're going through. And that's why this conversation has been so important. So we always appreciate you joining us every Friday, 5 to 7 p.m. Also, don't forget, you can always hear the rebroadcast. We rebroadcast this show on Sundays, 12 to 2 p.m. And don't forget, on social media, if you have any questions or comments, you can join our Facebook page, look at all the posts that we put. And if you have any suggestions in terms of topic suggestions, why don't you give me an email, send me an email, bkadams@nsu.edu. That's bkadams@nsu.edu. We also have a YouTube channel where you can hear shows from our archives. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been my pleasure. We'll see you next week. The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB FM. Thank you for listening.